Her kind feared her height and looks, but the human called her perfect. The twin suns of Vale Thura Prime burned overhead, casting bone-white shadows across the cracked red earth. Jared Hunter crested the dune in silence, his boots grinding against dry grit. His oxygen rig hummed softly on his back, but he barely noticed. Because there, standing alone on the ridge, was her, Vaerali. She faced away, unmoving. A tall, regal figure cut against the pale horizon, her posture impossibly still. The wind curled around her pale platinum hair, sending strands lifting like silk in slow motion. Her skin shimmered faintly in the light, cool turquoise, almost opalescent. It wasn't just color, it was light held in form. Too smooth, too strange, too flawless to be entirely organic. She wore a bodysuit the color of graphite dust, clinging to every curve of her long, powerful frame. The material seemed fused to her, not armor, not fabric. Just skin made darker. Her silhouette was sharp, carved by genes and exile. And she was tall, taller than any Vale Thuran woman was meant to be. Taller than Jared by half a head, even in his combat gear. Jared stepped forward cautiously. "Vaerali?" he asked. She didn't turn. He stopped a few paces behind her, heart tapping lightly against his ribs. Everyone had warned him. She's dangerous, not for what she does, for what she is. Born too tall. Looks like a goddess. And in their culture, that's a problem. But looking at her now, Jared didn't see danger. He saw isolation, strength, fire wrapped in stillness. "You're perfect," Jared said softly. Vaerali stiffened at the words. Then, after a breath, she said without turning, "Don't say that." Jared furrowed his brow. "Why not?" "You don't understand what that word means here," Vaerali replied, her voice like glass under tension. "I know what it means to me," Jared said. Now she turned to face him fully, her silver blue eyes locked with his, unreadable. Her skin caught the light and seemed to ripple faintly with emotion. "In our history," Vaerali said, "beauty was once sacred. But sacred things make people weak. They fear that now. They believe beauty disrupts logic, that it bends willpower, that it breaks control." Jared blinked. "And you were born." "Too much," Vaerali said, not waiting for him to finish. "Too tall, too expressive. My voice was melodic. My face made others look away. The elders said I would tempt those not meant to bond, that I would stir emotions too deep to be safe. So they left me untouched." Jared's tone sharpened. "That's their loss." "No," Vaerali replied. "It becomes my burden. Everything I do, how I walk, how I breathe, must be contained, controlled. If I stand too straight, I'm arrogant. If I look too long, I'm inviting a bond. If someone touches me, the law awakens." "What law?" Jared asked. "The law of returning," Vaerali said. "Ancient, in our blood. If someone declares me and touches me with intent," her eyes narrowed, "the bond begins irreversibly." Jared was about to speak when the sand shifted beneath their feet. He felt the rumble before he heard it. Vaerali turned sharply. "Worm," she said. "Run!" The dunes behind them burst open in a thunder of grit and bone. A sandworm, massive and ancient, tore through the earth with a shriek. Its segmented jaw opened wide, circling a gaping throat. Vaerali sprinted toward the cliffs. "This way!" she shouted. Jared followed, boots hammering the ground. The worm's screech echoed behind him, its breath hot against his back. He stumbled on a jut of stone, just as a hand closed around his wrist. Vaerali's grip was like steel. She pulled him forward, her bare palm pressing hard into his skin. For a second, her body lit with pale brilliance. Together, they dove into a narrow rock fissure just as the worm struck behind them. Stone and sand exploded, but the tunnel held. Inside, the silence returned like a slap. Jared lay flat, breathing hard. Vaerali stood over him, staring at her hand. "I touched you," Vaerali said quietly. "You saved my life," Jared replied, still panting. Vaerali didn't seem to hear him. "I wasn't supposed to." "You did anyway," Jared said. Vaerali looked down at her palm like it had betrayed her. "No one's ever touched me before." Jared blinked. "Seriously? Never?" "Not directly, not with skin," Vaerali said. Not since the elders saw what I was becoming. Even my family kept distance. Warriors train in silence when I pass. If I move too close, they step aside. Jared sat up, brushing dust from his sleeves. Because of the law? Because they believe I can't be touched without consequence, Vaerali replied. That to touch me is to tempt fate. That to love me would shame them. Jared gave her a steady look. That's the most broken thing I've ever heard. You don't understand this world, Vaerali said. No, Jared admitted. I just don't accept it. She studied him, trying to decipher if that was defiance or recklessness. Vaerali said carefully, the bond may already be forming. Jared asked, because I called you perfect. You said the word. You meant it, Vaerali answered. Then I touched you. That combination is enough. Then we'll deal with that, Jared said, calm. Vaerali's voice cracked slightly. Why would you? Jared stood slowly. Because I meant it. You are perfect. And not because of how you look. Because you stood alone where no one else would. And when something tried to kill me, you reached back. She stared at him, searching for sarcasm or delusion, and found neither. Vaerali said, more to herself than to him, you've changed something, just by surviving me. Vaerali knelt beside him. There's no filter strong enough to purge it. The only solution is to counter it biologically. Jared gave her a sideways glance. And how would we? Before he finished, Vaerali drew a narrow blade from the underside of her wrist and sliced her palm cleanly. Whoa, what are you doing? Jared asked. Vaerali's tone was steady. My blood contains stabilizers for spore toxicity. If you ingest it, it may bind to the Marith sequence and neutralize it. May, Jared said, eyes wide. There is a risk, but without it you will not survive. He stared at the soft blue lines running down her wrist, at the blood now welling into her palm, thick, iridescent, like molten crystal. I can't ask you to. You didn't, Vaerali said. She pressed her hand to his lips. Drink. He hesitated. Then he obeyed. The taste hit like lightning, sharp, cold, electric. His body seized, spine arching. He saw flashes, a high spire, a circle of robed figures, sand flowing backward into the sky. Vaerali standing in a storm, alone. He gasped, eyes snapping open. Vaerali was still crouched beside him, her brow furrowed, hand hovering inches above his chest. What the hell was that? Jared asked. You accepted it, Vaerali said. The bond started forming. Jared blinked. The bond? You mean like… Yes. That bond, she said quietly. Jared ran a hand down his face. We were just trying to survive. And survival, Vaerali said, is exactly what activates it. They sat in silence for a moment. Jared's breath evened. The ache in his lungs dulled. Whatever alien chemistry lived in her bloodstream, it had saved him. You shouldn't be this calm, Jared said. I mean, didn't you just break a cultural law or something? Vaerali stood slowly. I didn't just break it. I revived it. Jared pushed himself upright. So what happens now? Vaerali's voice was quieter. I don't know. She walked to the far edge of the chamber. The glow from her skin dimmed as she moved further from him, as if proximity controlled its strength. Jared followed with his eyes. You said your people fear beauty, but you didn't just mean attraction, did you? Vaerali turned her head slightly. No. To them, beauty is dangerous because it awakens things, desire, memory, history. Our old laws weren't rational. They were emotional, they were sacred, and they terrified the ones who wanted order. Jared said, and you, being you. I was born with all the signs, Vaerali said. The height, the skin, the voice, traits that belonged to the era before logic ruled. To women they used to call bond callers, those who could awaken connection through presence alone. You mean like soulmates? Jared asked. Yes, only it was never supposed to be cross-species. Jared exhaled. Well, your biology didn't seem to get that memo. Vaerali almost smiled. Apparently not. He took a few careful steps toward her. So does this bond mean I belong to you now? No, Vaerali said. Not yet. Not unless you speak it. Not unless you stay. Jared was quiet for a long beat. Then he said, "I didn't survive a sandworm and drink alien blood just to walk away confused." Vaerali turned toward him fully. "You don't understand what staying would mean. If the bond completes, I am no longer an outcast. I am a rule breaker, and you become a political weapon, a disruption to caste, to lineage, to balance." He shrugged. "Yeah, well, I've been called worse." Vaerali studied him, the lines of her face softening for the first time. "I don't know what to do with someone who isn't afraid of me," she admitted. Jared said gently, "Maybe stop treating it like a mistake." The light between them pulsed again, soft, steady. Vaerali turned away and sat on the cave floor. "You should rest," she said. "Your body needs time to adjust. The neural lattice may take days to synchronize." Jared leaned back against the stone. "You said that like you've done this before." "I've studied the old ways," Vaerali said. "But no, I never thought it would be me." Jared glanced at her. "So why did you save me?" Vaerali looked at him for a long time, then said simply, "Because you saw me, and you didn't flinch." They sat in silence again. But it wasn't empty this time. The bond had begun. The silence inside the cave had changed. It was no longer the silence of hiding or exhaustion. It was the silence that comes after a wall falls, when there's nothing left between two people but breath and the weight of everything unspoken. Jared sat on the cool stone floor, cross-legged, helmet off. His pulse had steadied. The alien toxin was gone from his blood, but something else had taken its place. A subtle awareness humming beneath his skin. He couldn't explain it. He just felt her. Not physically, not psychically, not like a voice in his head, but like gravity. Vaerali sat several feet away, tall frame folded with near-statue stillness, her arms resting on her knees. She wasn't glowing now. The blue light from her skin had faded. Her gaze was cast down, not to avoid him, but as if she were looking inward, deeper than the cave walls could reach. Jared cleared his throat. "You okay?" Vaerali didn't look up. "You should sleep, your body's still adapting." "I'm not tired," Jared said. She said nothing. He waited, then, gently, "You've gone quiet." "I'm thinking," Vaerali replied. "About what?" She hesitated. Then she said, "When I was young, I used to walk with my knees slightly bent." Jared raised an eyebrow. "That's a strange place to start." "It made me look shorter," Vaerali said. "Less threatening. The elders never told me to do it. They never had to. I learned just by how people shifted, the way they stopped talking when I entered a room, the way they wouldn't look at me." Jared's voice softened. "So you bent your knees to keep them comfortable?" "I bent myself," Vaerali replied. "In every way I could. I wore dull fabrics to hide the shimmer in my skin, tied back my hair, lowered my voice, walked behind others, never beside." She finally looked up. "It didn't work," Jared said. "They still feared you." "They feared what I made them feel," Vaerali said. "They called it weakness. But what they really feared was exposure. That something about me would unlock something in them. Desire, emotion, surrender." Jared nodded slowly. "So they taught you to disappear." "I became good at it," Vaerali said. "I told myself I didn't need touch, or closeness, that I was above it." She paused. "But then you said it." "The word?" Jared asked. Vaerali nodded. "Perfect. You said it and you meant it, and the bond started forming. Not just because of the word, but because part of me wanted it." She looked away again. "And that frightens me more than anything." Jared leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "Because you didn't expect to be chosen?" "Because I didn't think I could survive it if I was," Vaerali said. "If someone truly saw me and still left." He was quiet for a moment. Then Jared said, "I'm still here." Vaerali smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You don't know me yet." "Maybe not everything," Jared admitted. "But I've seen enough. I've seen how you ran toward danger when everyone else stood back. How you reached for me when it could have meant exile. You talk like you're some cursed monument no one's allowed to touch. But what I see, what I've always seen, is someone who never stopped choosing other people, even when they failed you. Vaerali's voice dropped to a whisper. I didn't pull you out of danger because I was brave. I did it because I couldn't bear the thought that the only person who ever looked at me without flinching might disappear. Jared's reply came softly. Then you should know something. She turned to him. I'm not going anywhere, Jared said. Not because of the bond, not because of some ancient rule, but because when you talk, I don't hear prophecy or danger. I hear someone who's lived too long without being held. Vaerali inhaled sharply. Then she said, You don't belong to this world. You're not bound by its codes, but I am. And if this bond completes, what happens? Jared asked. I'm no longer an exile, Vaerali said. But I become something worse, a challenge, a symbol of chaos. I'll be summoned, judged. They'll want to make an example of me. Jared looked at her steadily. Then let them. Her eyes widened. He continued. Let them try to explain why they fear a woman who stood alone and still chose compassion. Let them explain what's so terrifying about someone who just wants to be seen. For the first time, her voice cracked. You don't understand how much they hate disruption. I do, Jared said, but I also know how to stand beside someone who's worth it. She stared at him for a long time, the tension in her jaw loosening as something deeper broke, not in pain, but in permission. Then Vaerali said, You should sleep. Jared smiled. You keep saying that. And you keep staying awake, she said. I'm afraid if I sleep, Jared said, I'll wake up and find you vanished. I don't vanish anymore, Vaerali replied. Not with you. She shifted slightly, folding one leg beneath her and tilting her head back against the stone. For a moment, Jared didn't speak. He just watched her. Watched the way she breathed, slow and even now, like someone who'd finally let herself take up space. Eventually, he leaned his head back beside hers. They didn't speak again. They didn't need to. They didn't sleep. Jared sat beside Vaerali with his shoulder brushing hers, the silence between them no longer hollow, but full. Full of all that had been said, and everything still pulsing between them. Unspoken, but undeniable. In the quiet, she leaned her head slightly toward his, just enough to rest in the space they now shared without fear. Neither of them moved when the wind shifted. But Vaerali's posture straightened. Jared felt the tension ripple through her body before he heard the faint hum outside the cave, a vibration, almost musical, reverent in tone, and unmistakably official. They're here, Vaerali said softly. Jared stood, pulse spiking. You mean the council? No, she replied. Worse, the tribunal. He didn't ask what that meant. He saw it for himself when they stepped into the light. 5 robed figures emerged from the swirling red dust outside the cavern, their feet hovering just above the ground, cloaks weightless in the dry air. Their faces were covered in polished silver masks, smooth and impersonal. Behind them came a 6th, cloaked in gray, holding a tall, curved staff marked with living symbols that flickered like fireflies caught in stone. Jared instinctively stepped between them and Vaerali. The lead figure spoke, its voice filtered and toneless. Vaerali of the outer caste, you are summoned to the sky pillars by decree of the high voice. You stand accused of invoking the law of returning. Vaerali didn't flinch. On what grounds? The enforcer raised its staff slightly. The spoken declaration, the physical contact, the exchange of sacred fluid. You have reawakened a bond rite in the presence of an off-worlder. You will answer to the council. Jared said, She saved my life. She didn't force anything. The enforcer turned its reflective mask toward him. You are not of our people. You are not bound by our order. I accepted her blood. I spoke the word. And I'm not letting her go alone, Jared said. A second enforcer stepped forward, lifting a thin, flat ceremonial blade. Then you will be judged together. A murmur rippled through the gathered crowd, not loud, but sharp, like a collective inhale no one dared release. The enforcers stepped back in perfect unison, leaving a circular space in the center of the arena. "The trial will begin at first light," the high voice announced. "Prepare the human." Two attendants approached Jared, silent and expressionless. They gestured for him to remove his armor. He hesitated, then glanced at Vaerali. She gave him the smallest nod. Jared stripped off the outer layers, the air sharp on his skin. The attendants wrapped him in a simple tunic of soft woven fabric, ceremonial, unmarked. He was unarmed, unprotected. Every motion felt like something ancient unfolding again after too long buried. He turned to her. "Is there anything I should know before I die?" Vaerali's eyes didn't leave his. "Only that I will find you." The first sun breached the horizon. A basin of silver fluid was brought forth, carried by a robed priest who moved with eerie stillness. Jared caught a whiff of something sharp and cold. The liquid shimmered like metal in motion. Vaerali stepped back. She wasn't allowed to touch him until the moment of return. The priest dipped a slender blade into the liquid and stepped to Jared. "You may still renounce the bond," the high voice said. Jared shook his head. "Not a chance." The priest drew the blade across his forearm, a clean, shallow cut. The sting was nothing. The cold that followed was everything. Jared felt the venomous sap surge through his bloodstream, targeting nerves first. His hands went numb, then his legs. His vision blurred. The sun above him faded to a smear of gold. His breath caught, then stopped. He collapsed to the ground in silence. Vaerali stepped forward. The crowd stood motionless, not in suspense, but reverence. What came next was not performance. It was proof. Vaerali knelt beside him and placed one hand over his chest, the other on his temple. Her skin flared with light, not constant, but flickering, as if echoing his heartbeat as it faded. She began to speak, not to him, to something deeper. Her words came in a language Jared had only heard in fragments, in memories not his. Words that hummed like the low pulse of the earth. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. The sand around her feet lifted slightly, swirling. Her glow intensified. Jared's body didn't move, but in the space between silence and death, something stirred, and then light. Brilliant white-blue light burst from her palms and sank into him. Jared arched once, gasped, and fell still again. For a breathless second nothing happened. Then his chest rose, and again. His fingers twitched, his eyes opened, blinking hard against the sun. The sound that followed was not cheering. It was wind moving through the pillars, loud and low, as if the sky itself acknowledged what had just happened. The high voice spoke, slowly now. "The bond has survived. The return is true." Jared coughed, pushing himself to sit up. He turned to Vaerali. "You did it," he whispered. Vaerali stared at him with eyes full of more than light, full of everything she'd never let herself hope for. "I told you," she said, "I would find you." Around them, the silence shattered, not into chaos, but into uncertainty. The High Council had no more words. The old law had spoken in their place. The enforcers didn't move. No one did. Until Vaerali stood, and reached down, and took Jared's hand. Not hidden, not quietly, but before everyone. They left the circle together, and no one dared stop them. The wind shifted as they crossed the last rise. Behind them, the sky pillars stood distant and pale, a broken crown on the desert's brow. No one followed. No one tried to stop them. The trial was over, and the old law had spoken louder than any council voice. But still, Vaerali didn't speak, not until they reached the ridge where it had all begun. She stopped at the edge, where cracked stone met the deep red basin below. This was where he had first seen her, a silhouette against the suns, untouchable, alone. Jared stepped beside her and waited. "I thought it would feel like freedom," Vaerali said at last. "It doesn't?" Jared asked. "It feels like a storm just passed, but I'm still holding my breath," she replied. He looked out over the horizon. "Because it's not over." "No," she said. "It's just beginning." A long silence passed. Jared finally asked, "What happens now?" Vaerali's voice was quieter. Now. I'm not just a warning, I'm a precedent. Is that bad? It's dangerous, she said. The council may not act now, but in time, there will be movements, factions, ones who believe the old laws should stay buried, that I should have stayed buried. Jared turned toward her. Then we make it harder for them to erase you. And if they try? Vaerali asked. Then they'll have to erase me too. She looked at him, really looked, like she had the first time, only now with something warmer beneath the caution. It wasn't awe, it wasn't fear, it was recognition. Vaerali said, "You could leave. Go back to your outpost. They'd debrief you, honor your survival. You'd be safe." Jared smiled faintly. "I could, but I won't." "Why not?" He stepped closer. "Because you didn't let go. Not when the worm came. Not when they called for judgment. Not when you reached for me in front of them all." "I didn't do that for your sake," she said. "I know," Jared replied. "You did it because it was true. That's the only reason I need to stay." Vaerali's shoulders shifted, the smallest breath out, the faintest crack in her posture. For so long, every inch of her body had been trained to be unreadable, to be nothing but shape and silence. But now, standing here, she let herself be known. "I dreamed of the bond once," she said, "before I understood what it cost. I used to imagine someone would see me and not turn away." "I didn't turn," Jared said. "I know," she whispered. Jared held out his hand, palm open between them. "You've been called disruption, danger, too much," he said, "but to me you've always been the answer to a question I didn't know I was asking." Vaerali's lips parted, a soundless breath leaving her. He continued, "So let me ask a new one, not in blood, not by law, just by choice." She reached out, her hand trembling slightly as her fingers laced with his. "Ask it," she said. Jared's voice was quiet. "Will you stand with me? Not because of the bond, because you want to." Vaerali nodded once. "Yes." It wasn't grand, it wasn't ceremonial, but it was final. They sat on the edge of the ridge as the twin suns climbed higher, casting long shadows behind them. The bond glowed faintly beneath their skin, visible only to them, felt in the pulse that now mirrored between two once unreachable lives. After a while, Vaerali said, "They'll write stories about this." Jared smirked. "Then we'd better make them interesting." She almost laughed. "They'll say I corrupted you." He looked at her. "You saved me." "They'll say I used you to awaken the old ways." "You used yourself," Jared said. "I just followed the light." Vaerali shook her head, almost smiling. "You're strange for a human, and you're stunning for a disruption," he said. She finally let herself laugh, soft and short, but real. For the first time in her life, Vaerali didn't feel like a symbol, not a threat, not an exile. She felt chosen. And Jared didn't feel like a rescuer, or a soldier, or an accident of fate. He felt whole. Together, they rose. No one was waiting. No one would guide their next step. But they had chosen something old, something sacred, not the law, but the vow. And when they walked into the sun, not as prophecy fulfilled, but as people who refused to be erased.